3, 2, 1. This is the Own the Block podcast with your host, Josh Derriman and Pierce Burton.
So welcome to the Own the Block webinar number 2. We had a really good turnout for the last one, about 40 people. This one seems to be a little bit less with the holidays, but we'll keep it rolling. Today, we are going to focus on house hacking specifically and all the different options you have within a house hacking. This is something that's near and dear to my heart because the very first property I ever purchased, I ended up house hacking it. It was a single family home with an ADU. And we're going to get into that. And Josh is going to throw in some tidbits there. And my brother John is going to help us with a PowerPoint. So he's going to pull that up right now. Okay. So Jonathan, go to the next page. All right. So for those of the people who don't know, what is house hacking? House hacking is basically where you purchase a property as a primary residence, live in one of the units or one of the bedrooms, and rent the other properties out. And so the main goals or benefits of house hacking is, number one, live in a property that produces rental income. So this can be a single family, duplex, triplex, fourplex. And by doing this, you're reducing your cost of living, which allows you to stack up a lot more money. And then you're going to have a higher return on investment with doing this. I got somebody to join in. You're going to have a higher return on investment, mainly because of a low down payment. You're able to put down 3.5% on FHA on all the way from a 1 to 4 unit. You can put down 5% on a 1 to 4 unit on conventional. And then you're going to have, it's really an appreciation play. The main reason being is you're not going to cash flow right away when you're putting that low of a down payment. And so, but because your down payment is low, when you're getting that appreciation, it's going to be much more in terms of the amount of money that you invested in the property than if you were to put 20% down on like a traditional investment property. And then one big part of this is you want to try to get your closing costs financed into the loan. And so most of the time you're going to get a seller credit. So let's say I'm purchasing a property for $300,000. Instead, I might ask for $10,000 in closing cost credits. And you can not only get your closing costs paid for, but you can also get your property taxes and insurance paid for, your escrow account. So this creates a lot less cash invested into the deal because you're able to get those closing cost credits. Josh, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I do. It is definitely an appreciation play in most markets. There's some markets out there, I like to use Cleveland as an example, where it still can be a cash flow play. But one of the things that we're going to be talking about here is classically house hacking. You have to move into the property. I'm going to use Trish as an example here because she has a daughter just coming out of college. We're going to present an option here where you can be a co-signer with your daughter in this example. She can purchase with you a 4-unit, move into it. She only needs to move into it for a year. And then voila, you'll have a 4-unit investment property with, in this example, 5% down. And so classically that wasn't available. We were using FHA for a lot of this stuff. Conventional has rolled out, and there's some fantastic options, especially on the conventional side.
So here are your 3 traditional house hacking options. So the first one is your traditional, that's multifamily 2 to 4 unit, putting 3.5% down. And this option does come with some more restrictions where it becomes more difficult to purchase in metro areas. So then we have a single family home or a single family home with an ADU. and you can get conventional or FHA financing on this. It allows FHA allows for the usage of that ADU income when you're trying to qualify. When on conventional, it does not allow that to happen. And so basically, one huge benefit of the house hacking model is you can actually qualify for more property. Let's say you can qualify for a $300,000 home on your debt to income ratio on a single family. Well, if you're going duplex, triplex, or fourplex, or a single family with an ADU on FHA, we can actually use 75% of the rents from that other unit to act as additional income for you to qualify. And then the last option, and it's really a new option because it came out on November 18th, is you can now put 5% down on a 2 to 4 unit on conventional. And this is a huge game changer for the 2 to 4 unit market because it's going to drive the prices of 2 to 4 units up. And Josh, I think you have some things to say about that specifically.
Yeah, so the 2 to 4 unit market, we're expecting there to be a pretty sizable inflow of buyers for this reason, for this new conventional loan. And so if you have in any particular market an increase in buyers of even as low as 5 or 10%, it will really push up values. So just the ability to put 5% down on 2 to 4 unit is a massive difference. And we're seeing that already. We're having people going out and making offers and getting into contract. And so what it was before is, depending on the unit count, you had to put 20 to 25% down. And so being able to put 5% down is a huge difference. Being able to have a non-occupant co-borrower, essentially an investor, to go in with you is also a huge deal.
And then the other bonus across all of these is you could live in a unit and Airbnb the other units. And you could also, just if you were living in a single family home, live in a bedroom and Airbnb the other bedrooms. And so did you guys have any questions there? We'll open it up for questions. Trish has one. Okay.
Yeah. So on the ADU rental for that income, for that 75% income to count, does that rent have to be already in place for a certain period of time? Or is that, just I could, find a renter or have them sign a contract showing that they're obligated to pay, I have rented it for, a 1-year lease term. What are the terms to qualify for that income?
Yeah. So on a purchase, we're just going to use projected income. And so what we get is what's called a 1007. And that's just a part of the appraisal. And so essentially the appraiser is doing a rental comp appraisal for that particular area. And then if you're refinancing, we can use a lease agreement, or we'll look at your tax returns, and then we don't use the 75%. We use whatever's written on your tax returns with adding, things like depreciation back, that sort of mortgage interest, that sort of thing. Anything to add there, Josh?
Nope. That was good.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, for the traditional FHA, can you have a cosigner for that as well? Or is that just with the new 5% conventional?
So you cannot have a cosigner on a 2 to 4 unit. And we're going to get into that. And that's part of the reason why the new conventional option with 5% down is like a huge game changer, because it's kind of like the craziest loophole going, because essentially I could say, hey, Joe, I have income and I want to help you qualify for a 2 to 4 unit, and you're my buddy. So let's put down 5% on this property together. You live in one of the units, and then I can be an owner of that property. And then I could go do it again with another person, again with another person, again with another person. And I could essentially own like 10 duplex, triplexes, or fourplexes with only having to put 5% down if I had enough buddies that wanted to live in those. And once, people's argument to that will be, well, you're not going to get great cash flow numbers from doing that strategy. Well, this strategy is not about cash flow. If you noticed in the goals, we didn't put cash flow in there. It's about getting into a property for an extremely cheap number and basically just barely being able to cover your expenses, and then getting that long-term appreciation based on a very small investment in there. And we're going to go over kind of the ROI of one of these deals. I think Melissa, is she trying to talk? Okay.
Yes, I am. Sorry. So what he was saying, here's my question. To qualify, are you looking at tax returns for income and looking at statements, or are you just looking at 75% of what the rental is? Like, what are the income verifications for that? Like, what are you guys doing?
Josh, you want to go ahead?
So these are full doc loans. And so there are other loans out there that are, alternative documentation, but in this particular webinar, we're just covering FHA and conventional, which are full doc.
Okay.
And so if you are in a situation where you're self-employed and you're not ready to do it, that's the beauty of having the ability to do it on a conventional side with an outside investor, is that you can also use them to qualify full doc.
Nope.
All right. Is that it? Anybody else? I think you also can hit the hand raise thing. I'm not sure. Where do you do that at?
Yeah, we have B in here too, but it doesn't look like she's on.
Okay, so this is purchase example. This is actually the very first property I ever purchased, and I house acted. I talked about the ADU. That's in the second photo there. It was just attached to the garage. So single family home with an ADU. I purchased it for $349 in March of 2017. And I got a conventional loan, 5% down. And my average, I owned it for 4 years until March of 2021. And my average monthly rent was $1,900 a month. I got, at the beginning of that time, I got $900 for the ADU. And then at the end, I was getting $1,400. And then the entire time I rented out a room to my aunt for $700 a month in the 3-bedroom house in the front. My PITI was $2,100. And I ended up selling the property for $503,500 in March of 2021. Now, part of the reason I ended up going with a conventional loan instead of an FHA loan was I did not need the ADU income to help me qualify. Additionally, I thought if I did a little work to the property would become worth more, and I would be able to get rid of mortgage insurance. On FHA, mortgage insurance is for the life of the loan, and on conventional, it's only for until you get to 80% loan to value. And if you get to that mark, you need to call your loan servicer and get what's called a BPO done, a broker priced opinion. They essentially send out a real estate broker to give a rough appraisal of your house. And if you have more than 20% equity, they'll actually remove that PMI before you even pay down to that 80%. And this house is actually how me and Josh got connected initially. Josh did the loan on this property. Josh, do you remember anything about that loan that you did?
Yeah. Funny story about his loan is he was playing in the NFL, and he was playing for, I think at the time, was the Lions. And if you ever try to do a verification of employment with an NFL team, they're very, very difficult. They think that you're trying to call them to get on the inside. And so what ended up happening is I had to remind the Lions that they didn't actually have any fans. And so once we did that, everything was good.
All right, so here's the financial breakdown of the property. So the total down payment plus closing costs was $21,000. 5% down on $349 is like $17,000 and change. So I did have about $4,000 in closing costs and insurance and taxes, but I got a closing cost credit from the seller, so I actually was able to put down a little bit less, so my ROI would be higher. And then on the total mortgage payments paid over that 4-year period was $100,000. And then my total rents collected was $91,000. And after I paid out the realtor and other closing costs from selling the property 4 years later, just from the profit of the sale part, I made $129,000. And then I spent $40,000 on repair and upgrades. I did little things around the house to improve it. I also put in a driveway in the back of that ADU and redid the landscaping in the back of the ADU. And so one thing when people are house hacking that they don't think about is the savings that they're getting from actually renting. And so a 2-bedroom apartment in Sacramento over that 4-year period, the average would have been about $1,500 a month. And that total over 40 months is $72,000. And so that's an added benefit that a lot of people don't factor in when they're putting in these numbers for house hacking. And then I had the principal pay down on the mortgage of almost $24,000. So you add all those numbers up and subtract some, and it comes out to a $175,000 profit. And you divide that by 21,000, and that's a 835% return on investment from my down payment and closing costs. And so people don't realize how big of a return on investment that you can really get from house hacking. And I cannot think of really a better investment than doing this. Josh, did you ever house hack? I've actually never asked you that question.
No, I didn't house hack. I've been married too long. My wife would never let me do it, and then we were flipping properties before that. But I wanted to touch on something. So an 835 ROI is very good. I think everybody in here isn't aware. So you really kind of took this to heart and went off on it. So from 2017 to today, how many doors do you own?
214, I think.
Mm-hmm. And so this was your stepping stone. And so this gave you the seed money to be able to get to where you are. So in just a little over 5 years, you've over 200 doors. Yeah, it's pretty impressive. Okay, let's skip to the next one.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the positives and negatives of FHA, and then we're going to do conventional loans. Josh, did you want to take this one?
Through all of these line items, but what I want to do is I want to talk about the difference between FHA and conventional. So FHA tends to be more liberal in allowance, allows a lower credit score, lower down payment, a higher debt to income ratio. So it's very liberal in what it allows. The minimum credit score for 3.5% down is at 580, which is fantastic. If you are below 580, you have to put 10% down. Still fantastic. The negatives that they have is that there's a couple things. It's a little bit more expensive. They do have a funding fee that they finance into the loan. We talked about the non-occupant cosigner that you can't do, and there's some very specific rules about departure residences. You can't move more than a certain distance and still use rents. And then they have what's called a self-sufficiency test. So if you're buying a 3 or 4 unit with FHA, the property has to positively cash flow, which can be a challenge in quite a few markets. So let's pop over to conventional. So conventional is not the opposite, but it's the play against FHA. So it's more conservative in what they do. So it's a little bit more down payment, 5%. There is no self-sufficiency test. So theoretically, if you wanted to, you could go negative on rent on a property if you really felt like it was a good deal. They don't have any funding fee. The mortgage insurance, the monthly mortgage insurance is removable once you get to a certain point. There are less restrictions than FHA, and you can do that non-occupant cosigner. So what are the negatives? The negatives is it is more conservative. You have to have a higher credit score. You have to have more money in the bank. It has reserve requirements that FHA doesn't. You also have to have a lower debt to income. So with FHA, you can go to a 57% debt to income ratio. With a conventional, it's going to be 45 to 50. And so FHA will allow you theoretically to buy more house, a more expensive house than a conventional loan. But there's positives and negatives to each, and depending on your circumstances, you may choose one or the other. Pierce made a point the other day where if you can, doing a conventional loan as your first house hack is probably better, because your second house hack, you would utilize FHA and not be restricted to their 100-mile rule. So FHA probably...
No, it's the opposite. You do FHA. Yeah, so you would do... So with the 100-mile rule, go back to the other slide there, Jonathan, the previous one. So FHA has a 100-mile rule where if you are trying to qualify for an FHA loan, you would need to move 100 miles from your previous residence in order to use the departure rent that you're going to get on that new property. So you would want to buy an FHA property first and then go and purchase another property conventional, not the other way around, because it would be much harder for you to qualify if you're purchasing a property FHA. And then with the self-sufficiency test, I don't think Josh touched on that enough. In a large metro area, the self-sufficiency test has become kind of a hindrance to buying a property in, let's say, a Miami or a San Francisco or a Dallas, because what the self-sufficiency test says is that 75% of the total rent across all the units, even the one that you're not occupying, 75% of that have to cover the entire mortgage, the PITI. And so you can see how that can be a problem if you're buying $1 million fourplex and those units only rent for $1,500 a month per property, because then you'd have to only be able to have a mortgage payment of $4,500, and putting 3.5% down, you're not going to be able to qualify. So that's another huge benefit that the new conventional 5% down program has introduced, is there is no self-sufficiency test. So these triplexes and fourplexes that are in these metro areas are going to skyrocket in value even more, because folks can now qualify for them with only 5% down, when previously FHA wasn't even an option because the property itself didn't pass that self-sufficiency test.
So Pierce, you may not remember this, but a number of years ago, you put in an offer on a fourplex in Sacramento, downtown Sacramento, for FHA, and it couldn't pass the self-sufficiency test. So even Sacramento, which is relatively inexpensive,
and rate, I was going to get a 2.125 rate on that property, because that was when rates were at their all-time lowest. And it still couldn't qualify because the rents on that 1007 came back, on the rental appraisal, came back at $1,300 a month. And so even though I qualified fine, and so that property would have been a perfect candidate for that 5% down conventional program that was just introduced last month. All right. Was that our last slide, Jonathan? All right. Do we have any questions there, guys? All right, Trish.
So you said you should get the FHA loan first before you get the conventional loan. And I know you can have as many conventional loans, as
10 conventional loans you're allowed to have.
Okay. Is there a limit on FHA loans?
You can only have one unless there's extenuating circumstances. So you would, which would be you're moving far away from the area that you're currently living in. It could also be family size, so you kind of have to document that your family got larger, and then you have to kind of apply with that part in there. But in average situation, you're only allowed one FHA loan at a time. But Josh likes to talk about this a lot, with the FHA loan essentially almost being a bridge loan. And at some point, if rates are, conducive to this, you're just going to refinance it to a conventional loan. So then you could potentially do it again. And also you're getting to remove that mortgage insurance.
Okay. And not that this would, be the case, but it was always my understanding that you could only have one FHA loan, with, I guess there's extenuating circumstances. But if you had a conventional loan first, can you get an FHA loan after you have a conventional loan on a property?
100%. 100%.
Okay.
So that's a huge common misconception is people think FHA, the F stands for first time home buyer. It's not. Anybody can qualify for an FHA loan as long as you don't have one. Me having as many properties as I do, I can qualify for an FHA loan right now because I don't have 10 conventional loans. So anybody can qualify for that. And then another thing is on conventional with first time home buyer, since we're getting into that, is first time home buyer, really the only main benefit to it is you get a slightly lower interest rate and you're able to put 3% down on a single family property. And qualifying as a first time home buyer, all you have to be is someone who hasn't owned a property in 3 years.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anybody else?
So Trish, I'm curious. So do you see, from your perspective as a realtor, do you see, like in the Sacramento market, how 2 to 4 units would increase in value with a new program like this?
Yeah, I could almost, like, as you were, presenting, this webinar, I was thinking, my mind started thinking about focusing on like a different angle with approaching, clients, in that, this is another way, because it's, affordability is the question that, everybody's struggling with right now. So this is the way, especially for the younger generation that's, more willing to have roommates or whatnot. I think it's a great way to start breaking into the market. And because I was, just thinking about Joel's future, like, how is this generation going to like buy properties? But this is, this answer that question for me.
Yeah, from a realtor's perspective, you could definitely see where people are going to be more likely to buy 2, 3, 4 unit properties from that perspective, right? Because it makes it easier for them to do. And as you said, the new generation, they're more than happy to share rooms and space and all of that stuff. So it's conducive to that from a kind of house hacking investor perspective. Those multi-unit properties tend to be a little undervalued because of the restrictions in financing. So as long as we have this loophole, that I'm calling it, it gives the opportunity for more people to be out there buying and put more upward price pressure on those sorts of units than what we had been seeing.
Another important thing to note is that on a 2 to 4 unit property specifically, opposed to a five unit or more property, those appraised values are based solely on rental comps. When 5 units or more, not rental comps, sales comps, and 5 units or more are based on the income that the property is producing. So it doesn't really matter how much money the property is bringing in rent-wise from a value perspective. It's all about what those properties have sold for in that current market. And it doesn't have to do with like cap rates and all that sort of thing when 5 units or more do. And so the ability for those prices to get driven up is much easier. It's just the qualification of the individuals in the area and the demand for the property. When on a 5 unit or more, rents have to be increased and expenses have to stay low, all those different types of things.
Well, from a property management, or I guess an owner perspective, the one factor, and it's really not part of this conversation, but I think it's a missing piece, is taxes, property taxes, income taxes from the rents. You talked about closing costs, getting those factored into the loan, well, that's fine for the first year. But, so taxes seem to be like also what's pushing the rents and the home prices to go up, because if somebody's investing and the property taxes keep going up, then they have no choice but to raise the rents.
Well, property taxes in California don't go up. Property taxes are
Mine do.
Well,
What do you
Prop
mean?
13 only allows 1% per year, right?
Yeah. So
but
property taxes in California are 1.25% of purchase price, and then 1% increase thereafter. They barely increase in California.
I mean, I still think I'm just thinking about like the more recent purchases that we have. It comes out to like $1,000 a month, and probably more today.
Well, I mean, obviously, I live in California too. We're taxed to high heaven, but because they get reassessed on the purchase. So there's a lot of states where you don't get reassessed on the purchase. So it also depends on the state that you're buying in.
100%.
California is a tougher market to buy investment property. It is, and so but there's a lot of states out there where it's nothing like California.
Okay, so
Foreign
this
country.
conversation is about not just investing here.
Correct.
Okay.
All 50 states, except for
Okay.
Alaska. Nobody wants to buy in Alaska.
Okay, I gotta broaden my vision here.
No, it's funny, Trish. They're coming from California. I've had to change my view. There's so many areas of the country where investment property is a completely different calculus. Completely different. It's insane. You can get positive cash flows with a above 2 DSCR, where that just doesn't remotely exist in California. You can put 20-25% down and not cash flow in California, and that's just not the case in a lot of areas.
Well, then we just have more to talk about then. It's just about where you want to move your money and do this.
Yeah. So, anything else?
Thank you. This is really
All right.
I think Melissa's trying to say something. Maybe.
She talks to herself a lot.
Oh, she I don't know. She's on her phone. Okay.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. Bye.
Bye, guys.